Resumes are broken.
It's just being seen in the process.
First, your LinkedIn audience asks really tough questions.
Using AI or LLMs to have a good resume, no issues with that.
So critical thinking, I think, comes from that creation of safe space.
Welcome back to The Shift Show, the place where ambitious professionals get future ready without being overwhelmed. I'm Rachel Bourne, your HR translator, and today kicks off part 2 of the Tech and Data mini-series. So if you caught part 1, we're already leveling up your Tech and Data proficiency. And today in part 2, we're going to push it a little further, exploring AI-informed decision-making and the secret sauce of critical thinking. Guiding us are 3 amazing friends of mine and trailblazers in their own right. Jeet Roy, who is a data storyteller who makes metrics human for the Fortune 100. Lydia Wu, former HR tech lead at Panasonic, YouTuber, partner in crime, and queen of calling out tech theater. And Zack Kikendall, an AI to reality translator at Workday, who's always going to make sure we have the real story. Grab your notebook because by the end, we'll have some actionable takeaways for your own career and how to grow in your own tech and data proficiency. And I'll leave you now with Jeet, Zack, and Lydia.
One of the things I've been reading a lot about on like Reddit and, recruiting hell, it's like my new favorite page to read for entertainment, is all the people who are like, okay, I figured out how to beat the bot. As an expert, what is your opinion? Can we beat the bot with our resumes?
I mean, for me, so long as you are not like inflating your experience beyond what it actually is, which organizations will find this through background checks and other measures, right? Like using AI or LLMs to have a good resume, no issues with that. Our product and our tool at Workday encourages that, right? It's going to give you a better representation of yourself so long as it is truthful. And like, we all have to agree that we need to come to the table together and be accurate representations of the work and of what your skills and experience are, right? Like, it's no different than that.
Yeah.
Okay, but like, can we talk about what does beating the bot actually mean? Like, you got your resume through, or like some shady background story?
No. Especially these two who have worked with me a lot. Like, they'll talk about, Rachel, your Pollyanna is showing. Like, I fundamentally believe humans want to do the right thing and they want to show up in an honest, truthful, good ways.
Manufacturing killed that in me long ago.
But I do think we are at a place right now in kind of the candidate experience. Resumes are broken. We haven't really figured out how to make the candidate experience. And it really is that people feel like they continue to make their 97th Workday profile, right? They submit their information into a black hole. They never hear anything. They don't get any feedback. It's just a broken experience, Lydia, and no one has fixed it yet.
Yeah, I think from my angle, from a technology design standpoint, one of the biggest questions I've been asking myself recently is what has inspired so many candidates in the entire workforce to have the desire to beat the bot? Like, where have we gone wrong in the talent acquisition solution design, in the utilization and the rollout and the purchase and the sales of AI in talent acquisition, that we made an entire workforce feel like robots are against them? For me, it's more of a fundamental purchase, implementation, and design principle challenge than it is to look at individuals who are looking for ways to hack the robot, essentially.
For me, it's not about beating the bot. It's the visibility that it represents to you as a person. I think ultimately, like, all of these organizations that we support are inundated with hundreds of thousands of applicants, right? Like, this is the reality that we live in a global world, right? And to me, the benefit of the technology and the AI is if you are truly well aligned to the needs of the role, the bot will surface you. And but we're talking about a numbers game at this point, right? Like, you may be one of 500 or 1,000 applicants at any given time on one requisition. Like, that's the reality that I don't think people see on the other side of it from the organizational aspects.
Well, and that numbers game, right? Because the digital landscape has amplified this so much, right? Used to, you would walk around, like, I had my cotton, paper resumes, and I walked them into all the offices. Oh yeah. It It was super fancy, but it was the company down the street, right? Too, as opposed to being able to apply nationally and do some of these other things.
I think it's the demand and the access to things, right? The demand has increased so much. And, with remote work, with things that we could do, between different states, that demand on a system is really high. And I could see where you have so many applicants, you would always think the robot is against you versus for you, right? Because only one of them would move and I finally get that job. But to Zack's point, it's about being seen. And to your point, Rachel, it's the experience. Like, how can we make the experience so that humans feel seen and heard, even if the outcome of it is, I did not get the job or did not move to the next level, right? It's just being seen in the process.
Rachel and I were out at Stanford a couple of weeks ago with Amir Goldberg, who's a senior professor of business, and he's running a session on recruiting. And he asked his class very directly, would you prefer an AI to evaluate you or a person? And the responses were interesting, one of which I think the main response was, we prefer the person, but we know that AI is going to be less likely to introduce bias. But it's because we think the person is going to be a little bit more easily manipulated and we'll see more success with the person. Like, this is legitimate answer. Isn't that fascinating? And I understand that, but again, we're talking about technology. Everybody understands that it is a step above human capability in some of this analysis and recommendation, but they prefer not to because they know what the outcome may be.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because when you first posed the question, my initial reaction was, I'd rather have a well-intended person than a poorly trained, designed, and implemented AI looking at my resume. Because the challenge I have with some AI tools out there is that they will come to their customers and they will say, you know what, we're trained completely on your data. It's your instance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which as a customer sounds incredibly phenomenal. But one thing you don't notice is that if you load in 10 years worth of historical hiring data, you're also loading in 10 years worth of unconscious and unintended human biases that you haven't noticed before. And now it's all coming to light. So without a principle or mechanism of catching all of that, when you rule an entire AI system out from a talent acquisition perspective, you're basically saying, whatever I did in the last 10 years, go ahead and repeat that. And then TBD will figure out if it's going to work for us or not.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point.
Did this turn into a Hired Score Workday commercial? What happened?
Well, let's go back then to thanks for the detour through the hiring piece. Let's go back to the kind of AI informed decision making, which is still, I'm sure in that bread and butter of Hired Score and Workday too. And actually, Lydia, you had a really good LinkedIn post, I think it was yesterday, that people are, talking about people are either scared that AI will replace them or they're overconfident that it's going to solve everything. And you're advocating for sort of a more kind of human lens with it. What do you think is the right path, and how do we start to walk this wisely?
I think from my perspective, it's critical for every HR professional to take a moment of reflection, I would say, in the next couple of months or whenever they hear this, and ask themselves, why did they get into this business? Because 9 out of 10 times, most of us got into this business because we like people. The second question I would then ask them to reflect upon is, what was the last thing that you did, either in your self-development or how you executed the work, reflected how much you cared about the people? Because I almost feel like in the last 2 decades worth of finding productivity, efficiency, putting HR at the table, all of that fun stuff, we kind of lost the human side of it. But I think the question is, are we all ready to embrace that angle or not? So my entire angle in that article and my perspective now is, technology is going to allow you to become much more human, but from a change perspective, there are still things that you need to do to embrace that level of change and to sort of pivot your mindset so that you can become that human at the center of technology.
In your view, what are the biggest critical thinking kind of blind spots that you're seeing in organizations or with individuals, and especially when adopting the tech or the data?
Augmentation versus replacement, right? There is a feeling of being replaced versus you're augmenting part of your job responsibilities and making AI your friend as you're doing that. That would be my first point. And the second one, I think it has been said many times during this conversation, it's a human lens to it, right? what is ethical, what is not ethical, what is compliant, what is not compliant. At the end of the day, we are in this business to help people and organizations to do the right thing. The level of skepticism is great, but how can we bring into the table so that we are ultimately doing the right thing with technology?
Me, I would say I'm understanding how hypocritical this might come off, right? But I think that there are many users that have a beef with technology and are the first to blame it for problems. And I find that a lot of our issues are actually human driven to kick off those problems. It's one of those things like, absolutely, there are technology problems, changes happen, they don't propagate properly, there's errors in the system, 100%. But many times it is a user driven misunderstanding or user propagated problem that is like, you put your blinders on when you instantly jump to like, oh, this is a tech issue, the system's down, let me go put in a ticket, instead of coming back and kind of exploring and understanding, how did I get here? Like that's a big one.
Can I just talk about having run a HR tech portfolio for like 4 or 5 years? I kind of want to hug Zack for saying that. The number of times people have come to me and said like, the technology's broken. And I'm kind of sitting there going like, okay, well, what did you do? What did you want to do?
Show me what you did.
Right. Let's replicate this. And you're like, how do I politely tell you in 10 different ways possible that this is a human error and not a technology problem? And doing it also incredibly politely with a smile on, because yay, hashtag customer service. So there's that bit of it. But going back to your question about critical thinking, what I say might hurt some people a little bit, but I think is also like food for thought that they really need to think about, which is your organization structure, is your performance management structure, is your talent management structure set up for critical thinking? Do you reward people who ask thoughtful questions, or does your system inherently silence them and effectively, in turn, silence the entire organization? Critical thinking is not an individual skill in an organization context. I think it is fostering of culture, essentially, that needs to happen on the employer's end as well.
Definitionally, I think like, where does everybody align on what it is? Because for me, it's used so much that it's like lost all meaning, just like AI has. If you have a good like organizational definition of critical thinking, I think you would be light years ahead in most arenas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. So Lydia, double click on that a little more. What specific behaviors? And even like if I think about like my role as a manager, how can I build that in my own team?
For sure. So I think for all of the managers out there listening to this, my question to you is, if once a week, one of your direct reports came to you and said, well, I don't agree with this, or I think you can do this differently, and they can frame it in various ways, would you as a person be annoyed, and would you subconsciously ding them in their annual performance review as being too critical of a thinker, or as quote unquote, as one of my previous managers tells me, being too smart for the room, if you will, which was a really interesting performance feedback to have received. But the reason why I say this is that in order to foster an organization's entire ability to think critically, which is essential in the era of AI, you can't just say, yeah, this is a guiding principle, I'm going to slap it on a page. You really have to exercise it, and exercise critical thinking and productive discourse requires a very uncomfortable change that not all of us are used to.
For me, like Rachel probably experienced this with me as like a direct report, but like unhinged skepticism is usually like where I drive this to. Like, this is what motivates me. Like, I question everything, and that's part of like the critical thinking, my critical thinking approach, right? And part of that's my trauma from manufacturing, part of that.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, can we see more candidates? Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
The tech experiences that we've had, questioning everything to how you got there is the most beneficial approach that I personally drive with.
I feel like that needs to be a new HR newsletter or podcast show that's like the unhinged skepticism show.
Truly, I think there is a plague of assumption in HR as a function.
I was going to say, I ask Zack to dumb it down all the time, but
And kudos to you to make that space, right, Rachel? Right, because a lot of times what Lydia is saying is organizations
I stressed her out so much doing it.
no.
Well,
we don't create that space for critical thinking if you're not thinking within the lines of the bounds, So
In all seriousness, though, like to really kind of drive continuous improvement and to get better, you do have to question it, right? And you got to find the holes and poke around a little bit with those things. And I do think if you kind of show up and everything is great, let's blame the technology, some of those sorts of things, you can't get to a root problem. Like you even brought up the 5 whys earlier, Jeet. Love it, right? I mean, building that critical thinking skill, I do think is important.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest red flags for me, way back when I was sort of like interviewing for different roles, like having different conversations, is when someone comes to me and says like, everything's great. Like we're doing so well. This is an amazing organization. I'm like, yes, as a recruiter, I know you're trying to appeal to me. I'm like, okay, but tell me, like, what's in the closet? What sucks? You're like, well, like our system, insert Workday SuccessFactors, whatever system they're using, doesn't work that well. But sometimes I'm going to be like, okay, that's a really big company with an insane amount of market cap. So is it you or is it the system? What's going on there? It's one of those things. I think Jeet's point, when someone goes to blame the technology directly, for me, it's the first indicator that something's a little bit off about how they're looking at the world of human tech interaction and the role of technology in their organization.
Do y'all think it is easy to blame the technology versus fixing the process? Because 9 times out of 10, the process is broken, wasn't thought through, poor design to what Lydia was saying prior. And then it was a hodgepodge of systems that was created because guess what? We had some IT folks who had to do they had to do the deliverable and they had to meet some requirements, which wasn't baked in with the design and the end goal in mind. And now it's easy to blame the technology versus owning the problem.
That's 100% what happened. Do not turn this into like a feature request list. That's the fastest path to failure I've ever seen. What are we trying to get done and be laser focused on that outcome? And at every time the technology comes together properly when you take that approach.
For sure. And I think from just a level of effort and work perspective, process change requires time. It takes actual work. Whereas technology change is like, okay, well, 3 years later, we'll just refresh a contract with a different label on the top and call it a day. And we'll figure this thing out 3 years down the line. It just kind of gives you the ability to kick that can down the road without ever having to nail it head on.
Quick way to burn up all your cash.
Jeet, I want to hold a little space too for you and on the critical thinking aspect. We talked about kind of question everything, how managers can create the right environment. What perspective do you have?
As someone who has worked with you, Rachel, in the past, and we uncovered things in systems that were not even being used, right? But we came forward with those questions, like talent pipeline question that Lydia, you mentioned. We developed that whole suite of reporting, which was a system capability, was not ever being used. And thanks to Rachel and the TA team, we started looking at the pipelines. We automated all of these reports in a system which is now sunsetted, Kaleo. We had that capability for 10 plus years, was not being used within the company. So we had paid for it, did not use, and whatnot. And I say all that in context to, I had the safe space to go out and break things and try things. And I had a manager and I had teammates who were supportive of me to go ahead and try those things. And that was the first time in the history of this organization that Rachel and I and other folks were working that we created this suite of reports that never existed. So critical thinking, I think, comes from that creation of safe space, not only with your direct report, but also as an organization and the folks who are rallying and trooping with you, because without that, you can come with the brilliant of most innovative ideas, but you would not get the space or the support, which I have examples of that too in other organizations that I've consulted with. I think the positive light that we have to create that space.
you know what? Lydia and I were at Unleash last week. And this is even a space, particularly in, I think, even like Workday too. I had a reaction to one of the speakers, and I felt like there was kind of a conversation where they were speaking out of both sides of their mouths. Like, we've got to teach people to trust the system, but we also have to teach them to question it and be skeptical. And, when I think about AI and kind of, I don't know if the word is, it's not like a paradox, right? We have a trust paradox. And I've even said, like, I don't really care if people trust it, because inevitably they're going to have to use it. They will eventually trust it as the tech matures. How can we teach people to challenge systems, right? And to be skeptical without undermining the trust in the system?
I always frame it as like, what's the alternative? Is it people-driven processes manually on spreadsheets? Because that's what we have today in many organizations. Do you want that to continue? Or like, would you at least like the opportunity to put it into like a systematized infrastructure, loggable framework that you can then go back and audit and make improvements, and it becomes much more structured for you to drive your decision-making process? But to me, that's like no question. If you frame it like that, people can't argue with that logic.
Progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
I look at this as like concentric circles. So in a weird way, I can sort of see how those two ideas can exist on the same plate, right? Because effectively, in order to be critical and to be skeptical of a outcome from a system, you have to inherently trust the design principles of the system are set up in such a way that you are going towards the same direction. For example, if it's a hiring decision, if it's a performance evaluation situation, whatever it may be, you have to believe that the system is set up to align to your organizational principle, morals, ethics, etc., in such a way, and it's trained on proper data set, that therefore the outcome you're expecting should be the outcome that the system produces. So in that case, when that level of trust is there, when the system produces a different outcome, I think this is where a healthy level of skeptical criticism and everything else comes into play, because now you're fine-tuning the system and you're not undermining the system in its entirety, essentially.
The outcomes are explicit versus implicit when they're driven through people.
And it's not a Venn diagram, but a concentric circle. That's what I heard. It's not like separate. To me, I think asking better questions instead of blaming, because if you are starting the conversation with a blame, you have lost half the people on either side. So asking better questions leads to better answers.
It's like back to the relationship. Like if you were an HR practitioner and prioritize relationships, like why are you starting it off by calling the tech person's baby ugly?
Yes.
You're not going to get good results with that approach.
I think it's hard to be in the hot seat. I will also say that for them. So maybe some of that is also bridging, right? Bring the tech people to the customers, let them hear the pain, right? Mm-hmm. Some of that, I definitely think we can improve some of those partnerships. My next question is, I had some LinkedIn DMs come in, and I had asked for some feedback from them a while back. This one comes from Ashley on LinkedIn. If you could implement one kind of tech savvy behavior or belief into every mid-career professional tomorrow. So let's say they had, a couple of years out of college to, they're managers now. What would it be? I know, hard question, right, Lydia?
My God.
You get to pick one.
Be ready for your employees to be people and digital workers. Shift that mindset right now.
I think I have one. The era of the enterprise technology stack is no longer. So to thrive, you better figure out your personal stack and how you best work with AI and build that accordingly.
You're great at this. I'm still thinking, but I think one of the things that we can advise is how do we efficiently search information and retrieve actual stories from it in a cohesive manner. Because a lot of times middle management spends so much time going and helping team members who report up to them and finding different things across many different streams in the organization, and the top level management who is asking for things, and there are many different paths to it. So how best can you use AI to get all of that information together so that you can be the glue between the higher leadership and the folks who report to you?
Oh, so good. So I have one more question from LinkedIn. So this came from a new college graduate just entering her first job. She had watched the skills episode and she sent me a DM and asked, how do I build these skills when my job doesn't explicitly require it? So think about this like quadrant we've just kind of talked about. How can people do it if they don't feel like it's in their job description?
My wife, who is out of the workforce for few years now, we've had 10 children, she stepped out, has always been skeptical, at least initially, like why was using ChatGPT and Claude and all these different tools, and like why are you having these conversations? Well, now we're in the process of getting some work done around the house, right? Like talking about a pool or a patio, and she's using ChatGPT to create images and proofs of concept for like the work that she's doing. Like use it in your day-to-day life to solve those problems, and then you'll be able to start applying them in the business context. 100%.
I love that. And Ashley Unleashed with ChatGPT. Good luck, Zach.
Yeah, I'm toast. the tables have turned.
Okay, first, your LinkedIn audience asked really tough questions. I just want to put that out there to them. I think my answer to this one is if you're treating your job as your be-all, end-all sandbox of skills development, you're already putting yourself behind in sort of what the process of future work could look like. I would encourage everyone to kind of reframe and think about what do you want to do next or what don't you want to do next. Once you figure that out, understand what part of that future vision can your job support. And then the rest of it is really up to you to build and develop in your own time in a way that you best see fit.
So I'll tell you, Lydia, I feel like I'm going to have to do kind of like a career plan episode. I've had quite a few messages or DMs about this. And it's like, I love your point too, Zach. Use it in your everyday. I love to use ChatGPT to like meal plan or make grocery lists and some of those. It just makes my life easier. And then Lydia, creating that like strategy, what's your end goal, and then building your skills framework to that. I think that might be a new episode soon.
Do it in ChatGPT. It's a great executive coach. Like in all seriousness, like my jump to Workday was heavily consulted by ChatGPT and Claude and like going through this decision-making process.
Oh, that's really interesting.
You all said all the points I had because I was going to say I use Chef GPT to meal prep and I use what's Chef in my... There's a Chef GPT, which is so cool. You can go into your pantry and you can tell what's there, and it'll come up with a recipe, which is fantastic. Agree to both everything that you all said. I think anyone who is joining the workforce now and in recent years, one of the things that would be really critical is being curious, right? It's not just the problems that you are seeing at work, but how you can be curious about everything that is going around and having that open mindset of what can I do to solve the next problem, and then start small, start at home. I use ChatGPT to create a run plan as well for my marathon training, right? And I can go and tell ChatGPT like, hey, you gave me this plan, but guess what? I'm 35 something now. I can't do all these things. Can you adjust? And it will adjust. So being curious and agile, probably sounds extremely niche, but cliched also, but I think those are needed.
In case anyone's wondering how to use ChatGPT, if for whatever reason they're like, I don't run a marathon, I don't use a meal plan, I don't need it. ChatGPT will help you dispute more effectively with your partner, essentially. So my husband and I, we get into these like logic spirals, right? Like we'll debate what's the difference between a shrimp and a prawn. And he's like, no, my opinion is this. I'm like, no, that's not right. The other day we got into a conversation. I'm like, what's the difference between broccoli and cauliflowers? They look alike, but like, is there a difference? Long story short, what used to be like 30-minute conversations before with multiple Google searches and all of that is now like a 5-minute conversation of like, hey, ChatGPT, what is the difference between a shrimp and a prawn? And essentially we're like, okay, yep, here are the facts. Let's move on. Here are the facts. Let's move on.
That's hilarious, Lydia.
Commercial where they throw the red flag review.
Exactly.
ChatGPT helping marriages everywhere.
Exactly. There you go.
Well, it's true. I had an old friend tell me about using it to co-parent with an ex. I was like, they ran everything through and asked the question, is this too snarky? I think that's pretty smart. What is one question that I haven't asked you, or is there a particular thing you want to tell the audience that's navigating this like new world of work that I haven't asked you?
You were pretty thorough, I have to say. But I would say like parting thought for me, it goes back to two ideas. Number one, everyone is literally figuring it out all at the same time. Nobody has the answer. And for anyone who says that they have the answer, I probably wouldn't believe them at this point, because even the senior most researchers in academia are still trying to figure out the impacts of AI. What does that mean to humanity and all of that fun stuff? The second thing I would say is experiment, because only in experimentation do you find what remains truly human and hang on to those qualities.
What about you, Jeet? Any parting words from the wise?
Don't be afraid. That's the only thing I would say. Be curious and don't be afraid. It's just technology. It's made by humans. So it can be only as smart as humans are, right?
Well, until the AGI comes. Zack, how about you?
I think for me, I've just got like so much excitement in like the near term, the speed at which things are progressing internally at Workday and the broader landscape. But all of this is really like digital right now. And I'm also seeing so much progress on like humanoid robotics. And when I think about like some of the capability merging into that, the positives of iRobot and the other implications in those scenarios, like I think the future is in the next 10 years is going to be amazing. And I'm so excited for it. I've never been more energized in my life than right now.
That's awesome. And I'm so excited. I have a lot of positivity and excitement about the future as well. So you guys, this was such a powerful conversation. Thank you all for helping us, see what this being tech proficient and data proficient looks like. And my big takeaway is it's not about being perfect in it. And it's really about being nimble and curious and grounded in our human values too, Lydia, right to your point. So whether you're in HR, operations, finance, these skills I do think apply to everyone. So if you learned something new today, share this episode with a friend or a team who's navigating change in this digital transformation. And we'll see you guys on the next Shift Show.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right. Thank you guys. You guys, this was amazing. We'll talk with you later. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please subscribe or share this conversation with your friends or colleagues who could benefit from it. And jump over to part 1 if you didn't get a chance to watch it, so you can make sure you got the full conversation. And we'll see you next time.